The air inside that motel room was thick, the kind of thick that settles over a place where something terrible has happened. Detective Mark Ramirez had been standing in the doorway for 3 full minutes, unable to move. On the bed sat a 17-year-old girl named Lena Carver, missing for 41 days, presumed dead by everyone who knew her. She was alive, but the look in her eyes wasn't relief. It was something else entirely. When the detective finally knelt down and asked her where she had been, Lena leaned forward, her lips almost touching his ear, and whispered 7 words that made a 22-year veteran of the force step back and grip the doorframe. What she said next didn't just haunt those detectives. It broke something open inside a case they thought they had already solved. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in that room, and why those 7 words still keep Detective Ramirez awake at night. My name is Alex Harlow, and this is what the news didn't tell you. To understand why finding Lena Carver alive was more terrifying than finding her dead, you have to go back to the night she vanished. It was a Thursday in late October, unseasonably warm for the small town of Millbrook, Ohio. Lena was a senior in high school, the kind of girl teachers described as quiet but sharp, the one who sat in the back of the classroom and noticed everything. She lived with her grandmother in a faded blue house on Cedar Street. Her mother had passed away years ago, and her father was not in the picture. It was just Lena and her grandmother, a woman named Ruth who had raised her since she was 6. On the night of October 19th, Lena told her grandmother she was going to the library to study for a chemistry exam. She grabbed her backpack, slipped on her worn-out sneakers, and walked out the front door at exactly 6:15 p.m. Security footage from a gas station 3 blocks away shows her buying a bottle of water and a pack of gum at 6:22 p.m. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lena Carver for 41 days. She never made it to the library. Her phone died or was turned off at 6:47 p.m. at Olivan's, pinging for the final time from a cell tower near the old railroad tracks on the edge of town. The investigation that followed was massive for a town that size. Millbrook had a population of just over 4,000 people. Everyone knew everyone. And when a teenage girl vanishes into thin air, fear spreads faster than fire. The police interviewed classmates, teachers, the grandmother, neighbors. They searched the woods near the railroad tracks with cadaver dogs. They dragged the river. Nothing. Not a trace. No sign of struggle. No abandoned backpack. No body. It was like the earth had simply opened up and swallowed her whole. Detective Ramirez was the lead investigator. He was a transplant from the Chicago Police Department, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and moved to a small town hoping for something quieter. This case hit him differently. He had a daughter around Lena's age, and every time he looked at Ruth Carver's frightened face, he saw his own mother, his own family. He promised Ruth he would bring her granddaughter home. That promise began to feel like a lie as the weeks dragged on with 0 leads. The public narrative shifted around day 30. That's when people started whispering that Lena must have run away. Maybe she had a secret boyfriend. Maybe she was tired of taking care of her aging grandmother. The news cycle moved on to other tragedies, and Millbrook began the slow, painful process of accepting that they might never know what happened. Ruth Carver kept Lena's bedroom exactly as it was. She refused to change the sheets. She said she wanted her granddaughter to come home to a clean room. That detail, a grandmother changing sheets for a girl the town believed was dead, still gets to me. Then came day 41, December 1st. A maintenance worker at the Sunset Motor Inn, a rundown motel on Highway 9 about 12 miles outside of Millbrook, called the police to report a strange noise coming from room 14. He said it sounded like someone crying, but not normal crying. He described it as a low, rhythmic sound that didn't stop. When officers arrived, they knocked for 10 minutes with no response. The motel manager unlocked the door, and that's when they found her. Lena Carver was sitting cross-legged in the center of the bed, wearing clothes that were not her own, staring at the wall. Her hair was matted. Her face was gaunt. But she was breathing. She was alive. The officers radioed it in, and within 20 minutes, Detective Ramirez was speeding down Highway 9 with his heart slamming against his ribs. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In his imagination, it was a rescue, a reunion, a moment of pure joy. The reality was nothing like that. When he walked into room 14, the air hit him first. It smelled of stale cigarettes and something else, something metallic and sweet. The curtains were drawn tight, even though it was the middle of the day. The only light came from a single lamp on the nightstand, with a shade that was cracked and yellowed. Lena didn't turn to look at him when he entered. She just kept staring at that wall. Ramirez spoke her name softly. "The way you speak to a wounded animal, you're afraid of spooking. Lena." "It's Detective Ramirez. You're safe now. We're going to take you home." She didn't respond. He moved closer, slowly, until he was right beside the bed. That's when he noticed her hands. Her fingernails were broken down to the quick, and there was dirt caked deep underneath them, dirt so dark it was almost black. Ramirez knelt down, so his eyes were level with hers. He asked her the question he had been waiting to ask for 41 days. "Lena, where have you been? Who did this to you?" For the first time, Lena turned her head. Her eyes locked onto his, and the detective told me later that it was like looking into a deep well where someone had dropped a stone and was still waiting to hear it hit the bottom. She leaned forward, her movements slow and deliberate, like her body was being controlled by someone else. She brought her mouth right up to his ear, close enough that he could feel her breath on his skin. Then she whispered 7 words that made no sense at all. She said, "He didn't take me. I followed him." Ramirez pulled back. He searched her face for an explanation, but Lena had already turned away again, her gaze fixed back on the blank motel wall. He didn't understand what those words meant, not yet. But standing in that dark, stale room, he felt something cold crawl up his spine. He had solved hundreds of cases in Chicago, cases involving murder and unspeakable cruelty. But this was different. This was a girl who was supposed to be dead, alive, and sitting in a motel room claiming she had followed her abductor willingly. The medical team arrived and took Lena to the hospital. Ramirez stayed behind in the room. He watched the paramedics lead her out. A thin figure wrapped in a gray blanket. And he noticed something that made his stomach turn. As she walked past him, Lena was smiling. Not a smile of relief. Not a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of knowing. Like she held a secret so heavy that sharing those 7 words had only lifted a fraction of the weight. In the hours that followed, the investigation took a turn no one saw coming. Detectives pulled the motel records and discovered that room 14 had been rented for 3 weeks straight, paid for in cash by a man who signed the registry with an illegible scrawl. The motel had no security cameras. No one at the front desk could give a clear description. But here's the detail that still keeps investigators up at night. When crime scene technicians processed the room, they found 2 sets of fingerprints everywhere. Lena's, and another set that didn't match anyone in the system. But the distribution of those prints made no sense. They were not the prints of a captor and a victim. They were the prints of 2 people who had been living together, eating together, sleeping in the same bed, side by side, like partners. Who was the man in room 14? Why did a 17-year-old girl follow a stranger into the dark and stay with him for 41 days? And what Lena told the detectives in the interrogation room the following morning, the full story behind those 7 whispered words, is something you will not believe. I'll tell you exactly what she said in part 2. If you want to know what really happened in that motel room and why this case is far from closed, hit that subscribe button right now. I'm Alex Harlow, and I'll see you in the next one. They brought Lena Carver to the Millbrook Police Department at 9 o'clock the next morning. She had been checked out at the hospital, given fluids, a change of clothes, and a meal she barely touched. Physically, the doctors said she would recover. No broken bones, no signs of serious injury. But when the nurse tried to draw her blood, Lena pulled away so violently they had to sedate her. She kept saying the needle would let him find her. Nobody knew what that meant. Detective Ramirez sat across from her in the small gray interrogation room. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. A camera blinked red in the corner. He offered her water. She took it. He offered her food. She shook her head. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Ramirez had learned over 2 decades that silence is the most powerful interrogation tool there is. People rush to fill silence with words, but Lena didn't. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the metal table, her eyes drifting occasionally to the door. Finally, Ramirez leaned forward. He said, "Lena, you told me something in that motel room. You said you followed him. I need you to explain what that means. Who is he?" Lena tilted her head slightly, the way a bird does when it hears a sound it can't identify. She said, "I was waiting for him. I had been waiting for a long time." Ramirez felt that cold sensation again. The same one he felt in the motel. He asked her what she meant, and what she told him over the next 3 hours dismantled everything the Millbrook Police Department thought they knew about missing persons cases. She said that 7 months before she disappeared, she started receiving messages. Not texts, not emails. Handwritten notes, slipped into her locker at school, tucked under the windshield wiper of her grandmother's car, left inside books at the public library. The notes were strange. They were never threatening. They were personal. The writer knew things about her that almost nobody knew. They knew she still slept with the stuffed rabbit her mother gave her before she died. They knew she hid her grandmother's car keys when Ruth had been drinking too much. They knew she sometimes stood at the railroad tracks at dusk and imagined what it would feel like to just walk away from everything. Ramirez asked her why she never told anyone about these notes. Lena looked at him like the answer was obvious. She said, "Because I wanted to know who was paying that much attention to me. Nobody ever had. Not her teachers, not her friends, not her grandmother who loved her but was too tired and too sad to see what was really going on. This person, whoever they were, saw her. And that feeling, being seen, was more intoxicating than anything she had ever experienced." The notes continued for months. They grew more intimate, more intense. The writer described a life they could have together, a quiet life far away from Millbrook, a place where nobody would find them. And then one day, a final note appeared inside her chemistry textbook. It said, "I'll be at the railroad tracks on Thursday at dusk. If you want to disappear, I'll be waiting." So on October 19th, Lena didn't go to the library. She went to the tracks. She said she walked up the gravel path and saw a man standing there with his back to her, silhouetted against the orange sky. He didn't turn around when she approached. He just said, "I knew you would come." And they walked into the woods together. She never once looked back. Ramirez felt his chest tighten. He had been searching for a victim, for a girl who had been taken against her will. But Lena was describing something else entirely. She was describing a choice. He asked her to describe the man. His face, his age, his voice, anything. And this is where the story takes a turn so dark that I need to warn you. What comes next is deeply disturbing. Lena said she could not describe his face. Ramirez pressed her. He said, "You spent 41 days with this man. You ate with him. You slept in the same room. How can you not describe his face?" Lena's expression didn't change. She said, "Because I never saw it." He wore a mask. Not a ski mask or something you buy at a store. It was a smooth, white mask, with no features at all, just 2 small holes for the eyes. For 41 days, she lived with a man whose face she never saw. She talked to him, followed his instructions, shared a room with him, and never once demanded to know who he was. She said she didn't want to see. She was afraid that if she saw his real face, the magic would break and she would have to go back to being the invisible girl on Cedar Street. Ramirez had interviewed cult survivors before, people who had been psychologically conditioned to accept the unacceptable. But this was a 17-year-old girl from a small town, a girl with no history of mental illness, no prior contact with law enforcement. She wasn't brainwashed in the traditional sense. She was recruited, one handwritten note at a time, by someone who had studied her with terrifying precision. The detective asked the most important question. Why did it end? Why was she found alone in that motel room? Lena's voice dropped so low the audio recording almost didn't pick it up. She said, "Because I broke the rule. There was only one rule. I was never allowed to look at him while he was sleeping. But one night, a week ago, I woke up and the room was quiet. He was lying on the other bed, and the mask had slipped. It had slipped just enough." She paused for a long time. Ramirez said he could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. Then Lena said, "I saw half of his face. I saw his jaw, his mouth, a scar that ran from his ear to his chin. And I knew him. I had seen him before. Not in person, but I knew his voice. Ramirez asked who he was. Lena looked directly into the camera in the corner of the room, the one with the blinking red light, and she said, "He's still here. He's watching this right now. You haven't found him because you haven't been looking in the right place. He's close. He's always been close." Then she stopped talking. No matter what Ramirez said, no matter how gently he pushed, Lena would not say another word about the man's identity. The interview ended with her staring at that camera, a faint smile on her lips. The investigation is still active. The Millbrook Police Department has not released the full interrogation tape, citing an ongoing case. But sources inside the department say they are now looking at someone within their own circle, someone with access to information about the case, someone who knew details that were never made public. The scar Lena described, that distinct mark from ear to chin, is now the single most important lead in a case that has no name, no face, and no clear ending. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. How well do you know the people who are watching you? Not the strangers on the street, but the ones who see you every day. The ones who notice when you're sad, when you're lonely, when you're standing at the edge of something and waiting for a sign. Lena Carver found her sign in a handwritten note. She followed it into the dark, and she came back alive, but she didn't come back the same. She came back carrying a secret that someone out there, someone listening right now, does not want her to tell. If this story stayed with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss when this case breaks wide open, because I promise you it will. Drop a comment below. What do you think Lena really saw when that mask slipped? And who do you think was on the other side of it? I read every theory. I'm Alex Harlow, and until next time, stay sharp and stay safe.